the Patriarchate of Constantinople and the Freemasons, the Patriarchate of Constantinople and the Freemasons. On the internet, you can find several interesting texts dedicated to the fact that since the time of Patriarch Meletius, the Patriarchate of Constantinople closely cooperated with the Freemasons. Article from the website sobor8.ru. Freemasons and the 8th Ecumenical Council. Reverend Justin of Celli writes that preparations for the Pan-Orthodox Council began back in 1923 on the initiative of Patriarch Meletius Metaxakis. In his address to the Bishops' Council of the Serbian Orthodox Church, on the convocation of the Great Council of the Orthodox Church, in 1977, the Holy Father states, "The question of preparing and convening a new ecumenical council of the Orthodox Church is not new and not one of the last in our century of the Church's history. This question was already raised during the life of the unfortunate Patriarch of Constantinople, Meletius Metaxakis, a well-known vain modernist and reformer, the creator of a schism in orthodoxy at his so-called Pan-Orthodox Congress in Constantinople in 1923. Let us consider in more detail the biography of the aforementioned hierarch. This is how Professor of Canon Law at the Moscow Theological Academy, S.V. Troitsky, characterizes him. Undoubtedly, Patriarch Meletios Metaxakis was a major church figure gifted with extraordinary energy and great organizational skills. But it is also undoubted that he was, first of all, a politician who sacrificed church interests in the name of personal and political interests, and that his vigorous activity, which often deviated from orthodox principles, brought no small amount of harm to the Orthodox Church. Having just been elected Metropolitan of Kyichian on March 15, 1910, he joined the Masonic Lodge Harmony in Constantinople, about which the Masonic magazine Pythagoreae Equere, that is, the book Pythagoreae Equere, wrote on the occasion of his death, 1935. Parts 7-8, 1935. This explains much of his subsequent activity. In the same article, a little lower, Professor Troitsky supplements the portrait of the Constantinople First Hierarch with essential features. Undoubtedly, the future historian of the Orthodox Church will have to recognize the 1923 Congress in Constantinople as the saddest event in its life in the 20th century. Organized and headed by a Mason, Patriarch Meletius of Constantinople IV, the Congress self-proclaimed and illegally called itself Pan-Orthodox because, firstly, the Russian Church, which includes 3/4 of the Orthodox world, did not have a single authorized representative at it, and 3 Eastern Patriarchs not only refused to participate in it, but also passed a harsh and fair sentence on it. And secondly, because its very decisions were of an unorthodox nature, and in the words of the Alexandrian Patriarch Photius, reeked of heresy and schism. And indeed, continues Sergei Viktorovich, such decisions of the Congress as permission for a second marriage for clergy, marriage after ordination, the abolition of the Julian calendar, the recognition of the possibility of abandoning the variable cycle of holidays, and even the weekly or weekly schedule of days, violate the canons and constant practice of the Orthodox Church. These decisions were rejected by the consciousness of the Orthodox Catholic Church, and the decision on the new calendar adopted in some churches violated their unity with other Orthodox churches and caused severe internal unrest in them, which continues to this day. Patriarch Meletius Metaxakis and Anglican Archbishop Lang. Thus, at the origins of the Pan-Orthodox 8th Ecumenical Council stood the Freemason brother of the Constantinople Lodge, Harmony Meletius. It was he who initiated the pre-conciliar process, which, by God's providence, stretched out for almost a century. Here it is appropriate to remind the reader of the words of our great saint, the Venerable Seraphim of Sarov, about secret societies, everything that bears the name of Decembrists, reformers, and, in a word, belongs to the life-improving party, he said to his servant, Naab Motovilov, is true anti-Christianity, which, as it develops, will lead to the destruction of Christianity on earth and partly of orthodoxy, and will end with the reign of the Antichrist. Naturally, Patriarch Meletius kept his participation in the Masonic Lodge a closely guarded secret. On June 25, 1934, he issued a decree according to which all clergymen who were members of Masonic lodges were subject to immediate suspension from priesthood and the imposition of penance. And in a letter to another Mason hierarch who had caused a schism in the Church of Greece by introducing the new style, Archbishop Chrysostom Papadopoulos of Athens, dated May 25, 1935, the Patriarch of Constantinople sharply criticized Freemasonry as a delusion. Referring to these facts, some supporters of the Church Reformation speak of slander against the innocent Meletius. This opinion was held, for example, by the Athenian Archbishop Christodoulos Paraskeviadis and Metaxakis' biographer Hieromonk Sophronius Michaelides. The latter was convinced that the accusations of belonging to Freemasonry had no real basis. But in reality, the mentioned contradictions prove the Jesuit cunning and resourcefulness of the Freemasons. Rebuking such duplicity of all heretics, our Lord Jesus Christ warned, "All things whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye according to their works, for they say and do not. By their fruits ye shall know them, for there is nothing secret that shall not be made manifest." Mattfler 23:3-7:16, Mark 4:22. And the fruits of Metaxakis clearly testify to his affiliation with Freemasonry. The ascetic of piety, the Athonite elder Philotheus Zavakos, wrote in a letter to his spiritual children, "The criminal acceptance of the new papal calendar, introduced by the most lawless archmason Ecumenical Patriarch Meletius in the current year of 1975, has completely abolished the fast determined by the holy apostles." Meletius' successor to the patriarchal throne in 1923, shortly after the Pan-Orthodox Conference, Metaxakis was removed from the patriarchate by the people and the Turkish authorities, Eddi, and the heir to his errors, Gregory VII, who directly imposed the anti-Christian calendar innovation on the Church of Constantinople, hoped to hold an ecumenical council in 1925. However, the Lord prevented this plan. At that time, it was proposed that the council should take place in the Serbian city of Nis in 1925, writes St. Justin. But since Nis is not located on the territory of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, the council was not convened. Professor Trotsky, a witness to those events, supplements the words of the Serbian saint with valuable details. The Patriarchate of Constantinople, he clarifies, wanted to convene an ecumenical council back in 1925, but having learned from the bitter experience of the Congress of 1923, the Serbian Patriarchate demanded that all autocephalous churches participate in such a council and that the council be convened only after thorough preparation in the commissions of the autocephalous churches and in a general preparatory conference or prosynod. On December 31, 1925, the Holy Synod of Constantinople, under the leadership of the new Ecumenical Patriarch Basil Georgiadis, proposed in document number 23 many questions for consideration at the upcoming Ecumenical Council, which was planned to be held in 1930 on Mount Athos. Having familiarized himself with the catalogue of these topics, Elder Philotheos Zavakos perceived the anti-Christian Masonic spirit of this undertaking. Almost all the questions, with the exception of only a few, indicated by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, have already been considered in the divine and sacred canons by the holy apostles and the ecumenical and local councils of the Church. Modern fathers can be fully convinced of this by carefully and attentively studying the divine canons and the sacred Pedalion, a collection of rules with interpretations by Saint Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, the most authoritative source on canon law in the Greek-speaking local churches, ed. Therefore, we believe that it is pointless to convene an ecumenical council to consider those problems that have been resolved by the sacred canons of the divine apostles and the God-wise fathers and teachers of the Church. Then, the events of the Second World War, which began with God's permission, interrupted the pre-conciliar process, which was resumed, however, after its end. This continuation of preparation for the council is connected with the name of another Freemason, Patriarch Athenagoras Spirou, secretary of Meletius Metaxakis, when he was the Archbishop of Athens. Historic meeting between Pope Paul VI and Patriarch Athenagoras of Constantinople. In 1926, he took an active part in the Helsinki World Assembly of the Masonic YMCA. In 1928, a conference of representatives of the Orthodox Churches of the World, Committee of the Masonic YMCA, and the national movements of the YMCA in the Orthodox Churches took place in Sofia under the leadership of the famous Mason Dr. John Mott, writes Saint Seraphim Sobolev. The latter is the General Secretary of the World YMCA. The All-American Protestant Congress allocates enormous funds for world Protestant Masonic propaganda at his disposal. The second such conference took place in 1930 in Athens. The organizer of the Oxford Conference in 1937, and its representative was also the famous Mason Dr. John Mott. As one of the chairmen of the steering committee of the Ecumenical Council in January 1948, together with other members, he developed the program of the upcoming Amsterdam Ecumenical Conference, its organization and preparation. The same Dr. John Mott will also be one of the chairmen of the Amsterdam Conference. After this, it is not surprising that at the Stockholm Ecumenical Conference, which took place in 1945, and the Lausanne Ecumenical Conference in 1927, 80% of the participants were members of the Masonic organization, YMCA, led by the same Dr. John Mott. From this, it is clear who is behind the ecumenical movement. Behind it are the original enemies of the Orthodox Church, the Freemasons, the Holy Father concludes. Apparently, it was Motta, as well as his secretary William Adolf Visser-Hooft, 1900 and 1985, who had in mind the official organ of the Freemasons. The magazine Le Temple Temple is the name of the Masonic temples. Editor's note, when in 1946 he wrote, "The problem posed by the project of unifying the churches owes much to our order at the emergence of the first ecumenical congresses. The intervention of our Anglo-Saxon and Scandinavian brothers was decisive, and their activity was tirelessly directed toward organizing the so-called Christian unity." Both of these figures became partners and brothers of the future Patriarch, and at that time still Archbishop Athenagoras. From 1931 to 1948, he occupied the See of North and South America of the Greek Archdiocese. In the USA, Athenagoras became even closer to Mott, who was at the same time an American diplomat and carried out complex assignments for the US government. President Wilson called Mott the most useful person for the propaganda of Masonic ideas. Probably it was Brother Mott who introduced Brother Athenagoras to the American establishment. Over time, Archbishop Athenagoras became so integrated into the political elite of the United States that when in 1948 he was elected, or appointed, Patriarch of Constantinople, US President Harry Truman provided him with his personal plane for the flight to Istanbul. And almost immediately after his accession to the throne, Athenagoras announced the convening of the Pan-Orthodox Great and Holy Council. The first pre-council conference took place on his initiative in 1961 on the island of Rhodes. One of its results was the ecumenical decision of all participating churches to begin negotiations with the monophysites. Patriarch Athenagoras himself was an active participant in both the pre-war and especially the post-war ecumenical movement, sitting at the assemblies of the World Council of Churches, WCC. In 1955, he created a permanent representation of the Patriarchate of Constantinople to the WCC in Chambéry, a suburb of the Swiss capital Geneva, the form of which, by the way, is a typical example of the architecture of the Freemasons. All the meetings of the pre-council commissions and conferences were held in this center, right up to the last one, which took place in January of this year. The activities of Athenagoras' successor, Patriarch Dimitri, as well as the current Patriarch Bartholomew, have not deviated one iota from the course set by Brother Metaxakis. They all act in a single anti-Christian spirit and direction. True, in November 2013, the Greek religious news agency Rhomphea informed readers that the Patriarchate of Constantinople had officially denied reports of Patriarch Bartholomew's contacts with the Masons, publishing a communiqué in response to accusations of his ties to Masonic organizations. However, the facts speak for themselves. Patriarch Bartholomew is a graduate of the Swiss Ecumenical Institute in Boissy, Switzerland, founded by Freemasons and tasked with training ecumenical movement figures. The founder of this educational institution was the aforementioned greatest ecumenist of the 20th century, the founder of the World Council of Churches, the General Secretary of the WCC from 1948 to 1965, Pastor William Adolf Visser-Hooft, a close associate of John Mott, and the Secretary of the YMCA. The funds for the founding of the institute were provided by John Rockefeller. Currently, the Vatican is an influential Masonic organization. As French journalist Pierre Carpi pointed out, the P2 Lodge included many bishops and cardinals, and it was connected with the English United Lodge. A document leaked to the press reported that the Masons have divided the Vatican into 8 sections, in which 4 Masonic lodges operate, observing the Scottish Rite. The members of these lodges, high-ranking officials of the tiny Vatican state, entered the Brotherhood each on their own and, it seems, do not recognize each other even by 3 taps with the tip of the thumb. And in October 1983, the Italian magazine Oggi published a photograph of Pope John Paul II at a Masonic banquet. The Pope was included in a fraternal chain with crossed arms formed by the Masonic guests around the banquet table. Finally, the World Council of Churches, founded by Visser-Hooft and Mott, is a typical international Masonic organization, and Patriarch Bartholomew is one of its veterans. He took part in the General Assemblies of the WCC in Uppsala, 1968, Vancouver, 1983, and Canberra, 1991. Since 1975, he has been a member of the WCC Commission on Faith and Church Order. For 8 years, Patriarch Bartholomew was the vice president of this Masonic organization. In 1991, he headed the delegation of orthodox ecumenists at the 7th WCC Assembly in Canberra, where he was elected a member of the Central Committee and the Executive Committee of the WCC. Based on the track record of His All-Holiness, one can conclude that he is not only deeply connected with this Masonic organization, but has also advanced far in its hierarchy. Ordinary members are usually not appointed as leaders in any organization, and even less so among the Freemasons. By the way, the main goal of the Pan-Orthodox Eighth Ecumenical Council, as can be seen from the analysis of the doctoral speech of Metropolitan Hilarion Alfeyev, inter-Orthodox cooperation in the framework of preparation for the Holy and Great Council of the Orthodox Church, was and remains the legalization of the false teaching of ecumenism. Patriarch Bartholomew also speaks about this at the Istanbul Assembly on March 5, 2014, in a conversation with the primates of other local churches. He focused on ecumenical contacts. Bartholomew noted that thanks to the institution of pan-Orthodox conferences, decisions have matured adopted by all Orthodox on the issue of relations with non-Orthodox. For all Orthodox churches, these decisions were considered mandatory, which must be implemented in life, as the internal law of each of them. Then he expressed dissatisfaction that these rules are sometimes not observed by the autocephalous churches, despite the fact that they were approved by their representatives. By the way, the chairman of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, Cardinal Kurt Koch, after the announcement of the upcoming Pan-Orthodox Council, with undisguised joy stated, "If the Orthodox churches find greater unity among themselves than for the ecumenical dialogue with our Catholic Church, this will only be useful and conducive to its development, and will bring many good fruits." Archimandrite Paul Dimitrokopoulou, head of the Department for Heresies and Destructive Religious Organizations of the Holy Metropolis of Piraeus, in the article The Holy and Great Council, a faithful servant of pan-heretical ecumenism, speaking about the founders of this forum, testifies, "It is promoted by persons who are inflamed with the enthusiasm of the pan-heresy of ecumenism, and some of them, such as the Ecumenical Patriarchs Meletios, Metaxakis, and Athenagoras, Spirou, were members of the Satan-controlled Freemasonry." Thus, the process of preparing the Pan-Orthodox Council, initiated in 1923 by the Masons and resumed by them in 1952, is aimed at creating canons that legalize Masonic ecumenism in the life of the local Orthodox churches. Joint Declaration of Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomew on Commitment to Unity. Pope Francis and Patriarch Bartholomew emphasize the importance of ecumenism. Just as the blood of the martyrs has become the seed of the Church's strength and fertility, so too can the shared sharing of daily suffering be an effective instrument of unity. The plight of Christians and all those suffering in the Middle East requires not only constant prayer, but also an appropriate response from the international community. Vladimir Skvortsov, Literature, St. Justin of Kelly, appealed to the Council of Bishops of the SPC on convocation of the Great Council of the Orthodox Church. Website 8th Ecumenical. Archbishop Seraphim Sobolev. Should the Russian Orthodox Church participate in the ecumenical movement? Report at the Conference of Primates and Representatives of the Autocephalous Orthodox Church's Anti-Ecumenism website. The position of Elder Philotheus Zervakos in relation to the 8th Ecumenical Council, the Orthodox Apologist website. From a letter by Elder Philotheus Zervakos about the Old and New Calendar Styles, Orthodox Cross, No. 2, 26, January 15th, 2011, p. 3, S.V. Troitsky. Let us fight the danger together. Journal of the Moscow Patriarch Hate, 1950, No. 2, electronic version. O. Chetverikova, Treason in the Vatican. Electronic version. Patriarch Athenagoras, first website Anti-Modernism. Patriarch Bartholomew, first website Anti-Modernism. Visserthaft website Anti-Modernism. Archimandrite Pavlos Dimitrokopoulos. The Holy and Great Council is a faithful servant of pan-heretical ecumenism. The Apologist website, post in Live Journal by Deacon Andrei Kurayev. The Patriarch and the Masons, Istanbul. The Patriarchate of Constantinople has officially denied the rumor that Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople, who is the most honored of the primates of the local Orthodox churches, is a Freemason. The Ecumenical Patriarchate hereby affirmatively denies that His All-Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew has any relation to Freemasonry in general, Fanar said in a short statement published on its official website. Meanwhile, among some Orthodox believers, especially among those who oppose the participation of Patriarch Bartholomew I, who has headed the Church of Constantinople since 1991 in ecumenical dialogue, he is often accused, along with his predecessors, Patriarchs Athenagoras I, 1948-72, and Demetrius I, 1972-91, of being Freemasons. http://www.sedmica.ru/text/4289057.html. When in May of this year, a retired Romanian general and concurrently the current archon of the Ecumenical Patriarchate invited me to join the Masons, he fervently asserted that Patriarch Bartholomew had long been with them. To prove his authority, he showed A. His photo with Licio Gelli. He is still alive. In Italy, for large-scale financial fraud, the court confiscated the villa of 94-year-old Licio Gelli, the former leader of one of the local Masonic lodges, known as P2, http://lenta.ru/articles/2013/10/15/P2/B, his photo with Patriarch Bartholomew, see the letter of the Archon. Well, how can you trust people after this? News from the website antimodernism.ru. A monument was erected to Patriarch Bartholomew. On September 27th, representatives of the Bulgarian government unveiled a monument to the current Patriarch Bartholomew in Turkey, in the presence of the Patriarch himself. An impressive monument was erected by the Bulgarian government on the island of Halki, in front of the theological school, which was closed by the Turks in 1971. In Bulgaria, it is noted that the unveiling of the monument took place in secret from the church and society, and also with the participation of notorious people. In particular, in the photograph, one can see the former agent of the communist secret police of Bulgaria, historian Bojidar Dimitrov, as well as Archon Dimitar Atanasov, who is known as a 33rd degree Mason. In October, Patriarch Bartholomew is scheduled to visit Bulgaria. Source: article from the website antimodernism.ru. The Templars and the Orthodox Church *, a Greek Orthodox blogger, the website Threskutica, published today a series of photographs that illustrate contacts between Orthodox hierarchs and self-proclaimed Templars, from the Ordo Supremus, Militaris, Templi, Hierosolimitani, OSMT 8th organization. Patriarch Bartholomew and the head of the Greek branch of the Knights Templar, Pavel Tsolakian, to the right of the Patriarch, Archbishop Hieronymus and the head of the Greek Templars, Pavel Tsolakian, left. Metropolitan Damaskin of Velestine at a meeting of Greek Templars. Metropolitan Damaskin of Velestine at a meeting of Greek Templars. Father Leonid is a knight and chaplain in the OSMTH from the Order's website. O. Alexander Shestak and Igor Trunov at the founding conference on December 19, 2009. April 2008. The Order of Saint Blessed Seid, Prince Daniel of Moscow, is awarded to the Templars, Lyudmila Ivar and Igor Trunov. The awards were presented by Far Alexander Shestak and Far Alexander Dobrodayev, Synodal Department of the Moscow Patriarchate, for cooperation with the armed forces and law enforcement agencies. Metropolitan Damaskin Velestinsky at a meeting of Greek Templars. In the photo are Patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople, the head of the Church of Greece, Archbishop Hieronymus, and Metropolitan Damaskin Velestinsky. OSMTH was founded in 1945 by Antonio Campello Pinto de Souza Fontes. Since 1960, the order has been headed by his son, Fernando Campello Pinto, Herrera de Souza Fontes. The Templars claim to be the heirs of the Gnostic, semi-Masonic L'Ordre du Temple, founded in 1804 by Bernard Raymond Fabre Palaprat. The famous lawyer Igor Trunov calls himself the Grand Prior of the Order in Russia. The chaplain of the Order is Father Leonid, as reported by the Order's website, a priest of the Russian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate. In December 2009, the International Christian Founding Conference for the creation of the public organization, Defenders of Orthodox Christians, named after Saint Prince Dmitry Donskoy, was held at the Patriarchal and Synodal residence in the St. Daniel Monastery. This public organization is headed by the same Trunov and serves as an Orthodox screen for OSMTH, the official representative of the Synodal Department for interaction with the armed forces and law enforcement agencies of the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church. Far Alexander Shestak took part in the founding conference on December 19, 2009. In April 2008, Patriarch Alexei awarded the Templars, Lyudmila Ivar and Igor Trunov, with the Order of the Holy Blessed Prince Daniel of Moscow. Editor's note: as is known, many members of the Masonic Order are simultaneously members of other orders, the Templars, the Maltese, the Rosicrucians, etc., and vice versa. This is a common, generally accepted practice. Article from the website, Russian Idea, Masonic Patriarchs. The text and photographs of the Patriarchs are copies from the Masonic magazine of the Grand Lodge of Greece, Pythagoras, for 1979, issues 13. 14, January, March, and April, June. The article states that the images, icons in Greek, of these 4 patriarchs are located directly in the temple of the Grand Lodge of Greece. The 4 Masonic patriarchs listed here are Pope and Patriarch of Alexandria Photius, 1st, 1856 to 1923, Ecumenical Patriarch Basil III, 1844 to 1929, Ecumenical Patriarch Meletius IV Metaxakis, 1871 to 1935, Ecumenical Patriarch Athenagoras I, 1886 to 1972. For those interested, on the website of the Grand Lodge of Greece, you can find a more complete list of open members of the Grand Lodge who played a significant role in its history and in the history of Greece, including other brave pen agent bearers. http://www.grandlodge.gr/famous_gr_home.html. The cover of the same Masonic magazine, Pythagoras, for 1977, issue 5, with a photo of the Ecumenical Patriarch Dimitri. http://iasidnev.livejournal.com/163815.html. Written by priest Andrei Sidnev. Yasidnev. December 19th, 2007, 23 hours, 25 minutes, and 0 seconds. From the editors of RI. Let us add to this the message of the official printed organ of the Masonic Lodge in Athens in March 1973, in connection with the death of Patriarch Athenagoras, that he was a 33rd degree Mason of the Scottish Rite. Bulletin of the Western European Diocese of the Russian Orthodox Church Abroad, 1974, number 1, p. 33. You can also find other interesting photos on the topic on Facebook. Miracle. We discovered a monument to the Ecumenical Patriarch during his lifetime in Turkey. Representatives of the Bulgarian government unveiled a monument to the living Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew in Turkey. Interestingly, the event was held yesterday in the presence of Bartholomew himself. The impressive monument was erected in front of the building of the theological school, Holy Trinity, on the island of Halki/Hybeliada/ in the Sea of Marmara, within the limits of Istanbul. The event is defined as a miracle for 2 reasons. The first is that after Saddam Hussein, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Leonid Brezhnev, Patriarch Bartholomew is the first person to whom a monument was erected during his lifetime. The second miracle is that the Bulgarian country is personally led by the famous historian Božidar Dimitrov, who is famous for his exceptional inventions in rituals, ceremonies, and sacred acts. It is no secret that at the moment the political, administrative, and business elite are doing everything possible to prevent Bartholomew from being awarded the highest state award, the Order of the Stara Planina, upon his arrival in Bulgaria in early November. At the same time, completely secretly from the general public and quite slavishly, a monument to him is being erected in Turkey. Information about the event, kept a deep secret by the Bulgarian public, was leaked only on the Facebook profile page of the Theological School of the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Turkey, seen by the Frog News team. It says, in the presence of His Divine All-Holiness, the Ecumenical Patriarch Meister, Mr. Bartholomew I, the Metropolitan of Durkon the Apostle, the Metropolitan of Bursa Elpidophoros, Archons of the Ecumenical Throne, the Consul General of Bulgaria in Istanbul, and representatives of the Bulgarian government, a monument to the current Ecumenical Patriarch was unveiled with the donation of the aforementioned. The photos show that in addition to the head of the NIM Božidar Dimitrov, a representative of the Bulgarian government is also businessman Jordan Dinev, adorned with a ribbon with the cross of Saint Apostle Andrew. They are also accompanied by the well-known Archon Dimitar Atanasov, who is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Bulgarian Exarchate Foundation in the city on the Bosphorus. Atanasov is also a member of the Foundation for supporting the repair activities of the Iron Church, St. Stephen on the Golden Horn. The former director of the Religions Directorate at the Council of Ministers, Ivan Zelev, is also a member of it. Atanasov is also a prominent high Freemason, 33rd degree. Scandalous, according to our churchmen, is how in complete confidentiality and behind the scenes, without the announcement of the event by the church and state authorities in Bulgaria, it happens. The question is also raised whether the opinion of the Bulgarian consul in Istanbul about the awarding of Bartholomew with the Stara Planina order corresponds to the ostentatious closeness to him. Outraged, church representatives are considering whether it is appropriate to carry out secret shuttles by individuals directly connected to Masonic lodges, as well as to allow for the possibility of their unclear interference in the upcoming long-awaited visit. It is no secret to anyone in our church circles that the relations between the Bulgarian Church and the Patriarchate of Constantinople are very strained due to controversial cases that have arisen between the two. There is also the question of whether an initiative carried out in the dark poses a risk to inter-church relations. People from the Bulgarian church administration fear that the event in Turkey has the character of a roving traveling missionaries with unclear goals. They are also concerned that all this is aimed at discrediting the upcoming visit and insist that the state authorities take measures. According to state protocol, an invitation for Bartholomew's visit and the initiative to award him with the highest state award is from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, requiring consideration by the most serious academic institution in the country. For the upcoming visit of Bartholomew, scientists are cooperating with official state institutions, the Holy Synod, and the public in the most public way possible,